American Uncertainty by Dr. Sharad Vardhe from the forthcoming book Peeping at America. Have you ever pushed a loaded trolley at 10 miles per hour over a meticulously polished surface through a loaded, airworthy crowd of fat men, fatter women, forever hungry children, wheeled bags, trolleys with falling bags, stationary baggage on the floor, outwardly relaxed but actually tense security staff, and outwardly busy but actually lazy airline staff? I did it. I performed this three-dimensional circus at a time when I was not sure which part of the airport handled international departures. I consulted a uniformed 6.5-footer. He threw his hand in one direction and shouted, "That's international," laying more stress on the word national. So that was inner national, what the rest of us call domestic. I rushed in the opposite direction in search of international check-in counters. These Americans, I must say, are quite original in coining more accurate, logical, and easy words for the terms widely used in the rest of the English-speaking world. For example, Americans call the English pram by a functionally more accurate term, baby carriage. English chemist becomes a descriptively precise drugstore. Autumn is replaced by illustratively correct fall. Q is line. Torch is flashlight, and so on. In perfect extension of this scientific logic, American inner national ought to be a simple, accurate term for flights operating within the inner parts of the nation, which others imprecisely call domestic. However, my interpretation turned wrong this time. Consequently, I missed my flight and paid a one-way full fare to Toronto as a tuition fee to learn that T after N is usually silent in American English. And therefore, NT is pronounced as NN or as a heavy N. In fact, many of my colonial cousins from countries speaking pure English go through similar testing times in the US. For instance, a graduate student in material science had her first woeful brush with the American T. Her professor asked her to do an assignment on any thesis on derivatives of any money. She wondered what money had to do with her chosen branch of physical science. A fellow student from Sri Lanka clarified that American education was interdisciplinary in nature and also, naturally, commercially oriented, and so connected to money seamlessly. He guided her to his friend from Hong Kong in the economics department, who readily decrypted derivatives of money as financial instruments like futures and options. She worked on this interdisciplinary assignment with the focus and grit gifted to Indian women and prepared a marvelous summary of a dozen theses on money matters. Imagine her frustration when she realized that the project was actually on antithesis on derivatives of anti-money and not on any thesis on derivatives of any money. Anti-money is actually a semi-metal used in the electronics industry to produce semiconductor devices. With their original diction, the Americans never miss an opportunity to embarrass me. Staff of the overseas medical transcription units too get mixed with from time to time, despite their methodical training. A girl working during night time in her country 11 hours ahead of the US East Coast listened to an American doctor's diagnosis and prescription and printed any toxin instead of antitoxin and printed anonymous instead of antonymous. And she gave birth to a lawsuit in the US next morning, back in the US. My American host once frightened me at a business dinner by ordering an anarchic crab for me. but by that time I had become alert enough to invite a second opinion, usually in the form of a document. So a quick consultation with the menu card revealed that the real identity of the crab was Antarctic crab. On my side, visit after visit, I managed to confuse interfere with interfere, winner with winter, intersection with intersection, enthuse with end use, intermission with intermission, enrange with entrench, interpersonal with interpersonal, Henry with entry, and above all, Interpol with Interpol. In the process, I create so much misunderstanding first and so much ridicule later that I have earned an honorary membership of USP Square, the Universal Society for Proper Pronunciations in the United States. Now, I can guide the novices in the land of innovation and prosperity. During a recent visit to a national park that promised active wildlife, the park guide warned that we could spot bears and deer, as yet unnamed, moving freely around our wooden cabins in early mornings. An animal activist in our group, donning "I love you" top, shrieked ecstatically, "Look how the Americans treat even their wild animals. They give them individual names. A few of them here are yet to be named," he said. "They are yet unnamed." While the group waited to spot a Jack, a Bill, a Mary, and a Dolly, I disappointed her by disclosing that unnamed is actually untamed. But the fate of poor T does not end here. A girl from my hometown film industry, she learned it under the blaze of the Arizona summer, sun at noon. She was a part of a team working on a joint movie production. Once a third assistant director from the US team rushed to the location, looking for the rider. The girl had seen the rider going off on a ride on a new horse. She pointed her index finger in the direction of the valley and told a Yankee he has gone on a horse. The American in a hurry shouted at her, "Why is the rider messing up with a horse?" She shot back, "Are you in your senses? The only business of a rider is to ride horses." Further confusion was averted by a bilingual chap watching the episode amusingly. He told a Yankee that the writer was dozing in a nearby tent. Americans play some more mischief with the poor letter T. For reasons unknown, T in the middle of a word loses its identity at times and is softly pronounced as D. So remember that American ladder is not a ladder in America, it is latter. And let her get a better water heater is the American equivalent of let her get a better water heater. If you are still not confused adequately, here is the third T-bomb. If the letter T is at the end of a word, as in put, what, lot, set, hot, sit, right, or shot, Americans will not bother to acknowledge its presence at all. It is kept silent. You will not hear T at all. Game for more? Listen to the words ending with TAIN or TTEN, such as certain, kitten, mitten, forgotten, written. The Americans may hold this T in their mouth, but do not let it go out. The held T is not wholeheartedly granted recognition as a T. In legal terminology, it is acknowledging without recognizing. Recall that T and N are very close in our mouth. When a Yankee utters such a jinxed word, he moves the tongue in the T position half-heartedly, but releases the air for N. Poor T. I do not know what sin T has committed on the American soil, that it is singularly chosen for ill treatment or neglect whenever seen near N, as if it is illegitimately related to the noble N's. Asian Indians, I must say that, Indians from Asia, on the other hand, bestow due importance to T. The bosses never say that they will now take inner view of a candidate called for interview. T is solidly pronounced as T. A double T is given double recognition by saying, put a little drop of honey in my milk. Also, protection guard is not called production guard, and matter is matter and not matter. After traveling through the length and breadth of the United States of America, I have reached two conclusions. First, American diction is a state subject, not a federal issue, because pronunciations vary from state to state. Secondly, ragging T is a federal prerogative. There are 5 common rules across the states when it comes to punishing T. They are: 1. T after N may be silent or at times pronounced as N itself. 2. T before N is half-heartedly acknowledged but not pronounced. 3. T in the middle of a word may be softly pronounced as D. 4. T is T only at the beginning of a word. And finally, 5. T must face undue uncertainties. That's all about the American uncertain T.